Hello everyone. I'm back today with a super long episode. This is to make up for no episode on Friday. But also, I'll be missing this coming Friday as well. This isn't the new norm. I just agreed to help a friend move, so I'll be very distracted in the latter half of the week. Hopefully by this time next week, we'll be back to our regular 2 episodes per week. Speaking of episodes, we've reached the ever-anticipated Rock Lee vs. Sasuke. Of course, there are various plot thickeners besides the tournament that we've covered last week. Who is the Sanbi's Jinchuriki? We've narrowed that down to just 3 of the genin for sure now. The interrogation corps finally broke the mind of a particularly mysterious man who had been trying to capture Hanabi Hyuga very early on in this rewrite. Though the single word he let slip is still a mystery, it was enough to infuriate Minato. There are some weirdos wandering around town as well that Kiba's trying to track. He's alone now since Minato intercepted Naruto and brought him to the tournament so he could compete. Finally, before I start in earnest, I'd like to explain that this ensuing fight is a battle with a taijutsu specialist. As a result, it's really hard to provide imagery to properly describe how they're fighting. So instead of going heavy into the visual editing aspect, I'll be trying a more descriptive approach. Hopefully this'll help bridge the gap in everyone's understanding of what's happening. With that out of the way, on with the show. As Kiba follows the scent of the mysterious men, he notices that they've slowed to a crawl. Slowing himself, he creeps to the edge of a building to look down at them. They're standing at a corner, popping their heads out to check for guards. They've finally reached the straightaway that leads directly to the Chunin exams. No more corners, they're suddenly much more cautious. Though there have clearly been no issues up to this point, the 4 men cower under the shade of a building entrance as an Anbu lands on the building they're hiding under. Kiba looks at the Anbu, who points at him and signals for him to stop moving. Nodding at the Anbu, Kiba freezes in place and waits for further instruction. Disappearing from the ledge and reappearing beside Kiba, the Anbu asks Kiba what he's doing. Kiba explains the situation with the 4 men below and where they came from. They're just a little bit suspicious, looking through the Uzumaki tents before heading to the current population center of the village. The Anbu tells Kiba that because of the nomadic ways of the Uzumaki, they're generally neutral to nations, but even they can have enemies. It's very likely to the Anbu that these men are searching for someone in particular, someone of the Uzumaki clan. They might be seeking to take something back, or maybe they've been given a bounty on a certain Uzumaki. Nevertheless, Anbu are charged with protecting Konoha, so they tell Kiba to go about his day as usual so they can handle the people below. Under no circumstances is Kiba to stick around or even worse, attempt to aid them. Performing a sudden summoning jutsu, the Anbu conjures a hawk and begins scribbling a note for it to carry. They tell Kiba that Lord Jiraiya will be informed, and the Sannin are all present at the tournament today. The Sannin with the 3 Kage in one place makes that stadium the safest place to be, so they encourage Kiba to find his way there. Whatever trouble these men are thinking of stirring will pale in comparison to the raw power of those present at the stadium. Meanwhile, inside the stadium, Sasuke and Rock Lee enter the arena and square off against one another. Before the match begins, Rock Lee thinks about all his training over the last 2 weeks. He had finally recovered from his exhaustion following unlocking the gates for the first time. Might Guy then systematically ran him through several exercises to prepare his body for manual activation at will. The more he uses the 8 gates, the more he'll be able to endure their whiplash. Each gate has a different backlash to its use, which is why greater gates create greater pain, because they pile up on top of each other. But due to his inability to properly form chakra, Might Guy instead encourages Rock Lee to simply augment his taijutsu tenfold with the technique. He'd be both fast and strong, and as long as he held concentration, he'd be able to hold the form. The gates all draw from the same source of chakra within. As such, he could technically maintain the first gate for hours, but the withdrawal climbs in severity the longer he keeps a gate active. It's a double-edged sword, so Lee will have to be very careful with how long he lets each gate last before relinquishing it. However, if the first gate's about to diminish because its side effects become overbearing, Lee can reset the issue by entering into the next gate. This would propagate the positive effects, doubling up on his ability, as well as ease the pain of the backlash. This method works with all the gates. However, the concentration required for the later stages is unparalleled in difficulty. Might Guy thinks that if Rock Lee unlocks the 6th or 7th gate, he might even be able to use Jutsu, if even temporarily. It still wouldn't be a very good idea, since Lee's had no life experience with forming Jutsu. It's just an indication of how precise one's chakra control becomes during the later levels, and represents the insane exponential growth one can experience in such a short period. In the 2 weeks leading to Phase 3, Might Guy also increased Rock Lee's weights and tells him to think of every forced disadvantage as a limiter. Since Lee can't use ninjutsu or genjutsu, the only tricks up his sleeve will be limiters that he can actively choose to remove. The weights are a limiter, and the gates are a limiter. The more removable limiters, the more he can surprise his foe, and the more he can conserve his own energy. Might Guy asks if there's any way that Sasuke could know that Rock Lee has access to the gates. Through a link of friendships, Rock Lee thinks that since Ino witnessed it, she'd tell Shikamaru, and since he's in Sasuke's team, it would make sense for him to have heard of it. With this in mind, Might Guy tells Rock Lee that before the tournaments start, they'll train to also unlock the 3rd gate to preserve their opportunity of surprise. Sasuke is also of the Uchiha clan, so his eyes can see many things that normal humans cannot. As swift as Rock Lee may be, or unpredictable as his tricks might be, for Sasuke, they'll all appear choreographed and easy to anticipate. He can copy jutsu, but in this fight, he'd only be able to dish those out and not steal any. In a way, this is a clear advantage for Rock Lee. He can best Sasuke in taijutsu, and he has no ninjutsu or genjutsu for Sasuke to steal. Might Guy tells Lee that there are more to the martial arts styles that he's used up until this point. He needs to not only be able to fluidly trade between the stances, but he needs to remember first and foremost that he's a ninja. These exams are for the promotion, not to look amazing or be bombastic on the battlefield. It's fun to be flashy, but the tournament isn't for fun. It might seem dishonorable, but any style of fighting to avoid damage to yourself or to disable your opponent is at the heart of the Academy's teachings. Fewer casualties and more prisoners for interrogation. Assassination comes later, if Lee can prove himself worthy of the title of ninja. Breathing deep, Rock Lee raises his arm and adopts the initiating stance for combat. He stares hard at Sasuke, at the arena, at the walls around. His anticipation for this moment, when he could finally fight all out, have come to a head, and everything feels slow around him. At the edge of the arena, at various points, there are trees to offer limited shade and darkness for cover. This isn't a match idealized for deception and surprise attacks. They only want to see him attack. But if he's going to follow Might Guy's teachings, how can he prove himself a ninja on the open field? Ninja are deadly, but they're subtle, sneaky, and quick as well. Ninja are not meant to be seen, but Lee knows how to not be seen. As Iruka finally starts the match, Sasuke reaches into his pack and with smooth fluidity hurls several shuriken towards Lee. Relaxing his form, Lee leans to the left to dodge the shuriken, and in the next moment, he's gone, and where he was is just some kicked up dirt. Sasuke's Sharingan was engaged before the match's start. He was worried Lee would attempt some very fast combat and wanted to be ready for it immediately. And he knew Lee would be fast, but even his Sharingan eyes barely tracked where Lee disappeared to. The light rustling of leaves was also a giveaway for where Lee decided to escape to. Too subtle for most, but Sasuke caught it. Pivoting in place, Sasuke stares into the shadowy cover to see if he can't spot Lee. He can feel his eyes strain as they hone in on any quivering movement. A slight wind rustles the grass and the leaves flutter ever so slightly, threatening to distract from the hiding Lee. He could douse the woods in fire, but Sasuke doesn't necessarily want to take Lee on in a forced taijutsu. If he can take him out from a distance, Sasuke can save his strength for that extra match he has to do compared to everyone else. Although Naruto shouldn't be a challenge, an extra fight is still an extra fight. On day 2 of attempting to channel chakra for a whole day, Tsunade comes out to check on his progress during her break. She helps him with his form and even his manner of breathing to actually make the process easier. Following her instructions quickly and understanding easily, Tsunade smiles at him. She tells him that his father used to always talk about him and Itachi, but this information almost breaks his concentration. Stabilizing his channeling, Sasuke asks her how well she knew his father. He had a rather strained relationship with his mom, so his dad became the peacekeeper when he was little. But he was still so young when both of them died, and he loved hearing stories about his lost family. Tsunade reveals that she saw Fugaku every day when he came to the hospital to pick up Mikoto, Sasuke's mother. At least, these were during slumps in the war. During the war itself, no one got to see their loved ones. She goes on to explain how smitten Fugaku was with Mikoto, that he spent every free moment he could to be with her. Sasuke's brow furls in confusion. This was not the dad that he remembered, and it sounded totally out of character for him to be so lovey-dovey, even if it was with his eventual wife. Distracted by the realization, Sasuke asks why his mom was at the hospital for so long. Tsunade tells him that his mother had a particular knack for calming patients down and helping distract them from pain. It's not just the act of closing wounds and curing a fever that makes someone a good nurse. In Sasuke's life, his mother was only at home every other day because of her annoying distraction. To think she had previously been so active in helping the community. Losing his thought process, Sasuke asks Tsunade if his parents were loyal to the Hokage. With the state of affairs of the current clan, he wonders how long the dissension has been a problem. Tsunade studies Sasuke thoughtfully before telling him that if he channels successfully to Nightfall, she'll tell him the answer to that question. She knew that he was desperate for some knowledge of his parents' leanings, regardless of how painful that truth could potentially be. Gritting his teeth, Sasuke promises that no matter what, he'll make it to the end of the day. Remembering the truth of his parents as they'd been on his mind over the last several days, Sasuke's eyes soften and he hesitates. This is rare for him as he reaches into his pack, unsure of what trick he should deploy to force Rock Lee from hiding. Performing a signature fire-style technique, the Phoenix Flower Jutsu, Sasuke peppers the tree cover with small blasts of fire, not to burn the area to ash, but to smoke out Lee. With Lee's cover now on a timer, Sasuke leaps not away, but into the smoke. As he enters the blazing area, he spots a hole in the ground behind one of the trees, determining that Lee had dug elsewhere. Why was he being so elusive rather than just fighting outright? Every other time he'd ever seen Lee fight, it was outright fisticuffs. What was different this time? Shrugging, Sasuke pulls out a paper bomb and throws it into the hole, darting free from the burning trees. As he emerges into clean air, his peripheral vision picks up a flash of movement. As he turns to look, Rock Lee appears beside him, kicking him square in the chest and launching Sasuke 20 feet across the arena. The explosion from the paper take goes off, surprising Rock Lee and forcing him to leap out of proximity of the falling fire and debris. Standing again and patting his chest, Sasuke looks at Rock Lee and wonders if the hole in the ground was just a decoy. This time, he can't lose track of Lee. As day 2 of his training closes out, Sasuke is withstanding a loss of consciousness with every fiber of his being. Tsunade comes outside, honestly shocked that he's still standing. When she comes to speak with him, Sasuke continues to channel despite being allowed to stop. He demands for her to tell him about his parents before he stops. Patting him on the shoulder is all it takes to push him off his feet. This is simply a combination of his exhaustion and Tsunade's strength. Standing over him, Tsunade smirks and agrees to give him her answer. Inwardly, she didn't think Sasuke would succeed on just the second day. He clearly had the ability to sharpen his chakra control, but to do so with such a little carrot of information waiting for him was impressive. More and more, faster and faster, she's seeing Itachi's genius in him as well, just as Fugaku said. She tells Sasuke that Fugaku had his misgivings about the third Hokage. He was in office for a very long time before handing it off to the fourth. Even as he became advanced in age, and several promising ninja grew up around him, Hiruzen continually refused to pass off the Kage title to another. The legendary Sannin were consistently nominated by various village families, but he would not step down. It was fine for some, irritating for others, and enraging for the rest. Luckily, however, Fugaku seemed to turn over a new leaf when Minato received the title, but the distrust was slow to dissolve. Danzo's arrest certainly calmed most of the dissent that was forming in the Uchiha clan at the time, but Fugaku was angry for so many years at leadership, so it was difficult for him to move on. Tsunade tells Sasuke that tomorrow is a new day, and she agrees to teach him some of her craft. However, in 2 weeks, very little can be taught, so they'll stick with the basics. He asks what about his mom, and Tsunade tells him if he can overcome the next challenge, she'll spill the beans on Mikoto. On day 3, Tsunade tells him that her martial arts are heavily reliant on chakra control. She combines chakra with her form, technique, and strength to augment all of it. With it, she can break buildings apart in one strike. The most basic part of this is to concentrate chakra just in front of his striking limb. This would be about an inch ahead of his knuckles and feet. She likens this to the process of climbing trees and walking on water. It's a very similar concept, except one is very easy to do and the other is extremely challenging. Maintaining that flow of chakra is the most essential part of increasing the destructive capacity of martial arts. Sasuke asks if, instead of basic chakra, it's possible to use his chakra natures, like fire, instead. Tsunade tells him that's even more challenging, as it increases the risk of self-injury substantially. But at the end of the day, the greater chakra control someone has, the better they'd be at any of these challenges. As Lee darts around him, Sasuke is only able to keep up with him thanks to his Sharingan. None of his ninjutsu would ever be fast enough to stop Lee in his tracks. So, Sasuke is forced on the defensive, waiting for Lee to strike. He's not nearly as straightforward now as he was when he fought Neji, and it's throwing off Sasuke's expectations. Finally taking an aggressive stance, Lee dives at Sasuke. They trade several unsuccessful blows as Lee dodges everything Sasuke throws, and Sasuke blocks everything Lee throws. Making distance again, Lee continues his high-speed evasion. Pulling a paper bomb from his pack, Sasuke carefully slides it up his detached sleeve before grabbing a shuriken as cover and pulling his hand back out. As Rock Lee dives for another flurry of strikes, Sasuke throws the shuriken to keep him off balance. Engaging in several more traded blows, Sasuke deftly plants the paper bomb on Lee while blocking one of his strikes. The precision required for such a quick move drops Sasuke's guard. This allows for Lee to land several blows before making distance again. Only the sounds of sizzling catches Lee's attention to the bomb planted on him. Even with his speed in removing the bomb, it still goes off in close proximity and Lee eats most of the blast. With his own opening created, Sasuke takes the offensive with a flying knee. The flourish is large and easily dodged for Lee as he rolls away from his opponent. Finding his feet, he brandishes the weights on his calves and removes them quickly. There is no bombastic showing for how this will affect his speed. Additionally, he doesn't have as much weight at this point as he did in canon, since he'd been training with them for a full year at that point. Sasuke completely disregards them as he dives in to keep Lee on his back foot. Not showcasing this new speed immediately, Lee entertains another melee with Sasuke, calibrating his strikes to only be slightly faster so as to slip between Sasuke's guarding. Sasuke's strikes are strong, but if they can never hit Lee, then he poses no threat at all. This match is his, Lee decides. On a private balcony apart from the public stands, Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Orochimaru sit, squabbling about the matches. Jiraiya is still upset that Minato resumed the match, since Sakura clearly had it won. If he wasn't a Hokage, Jiraiya muses with frustration. Orochimaru laughs at Jiraiya's poor fortune. The Hyuga kid has so much potential to be phenomenal. Why should that chance be wasted on some no-name girl? It's also most opportune for Orochimaru that Naruto's fighting a battle-weakened opponent after this match. Things couldn't be more in his favor considering Naruto's lacking progress of the last 2 weeks. Tsunade tells him that he hasn't seen anything yet. Sasuke's such a genius that it frightens her a little bit. Not as much as Itachi or Minato before him, but it's close. Might Guy's kid is plenty strong, but taijutsu alone won't get him very far, she says. Orochimaru agrees, voice turning slightly sour as he talks about Lee with an intense dislike. How that child made it through Academy with such a handicap just indicates what weaklings the Academy's willing to send through these days. Jiraiya tells them that hyper-specialization is a legitimate strategy. Not to mention, that's where most Hiden techniques come from, and this could be the start of one. Laughing again, Orochimaru dismisses that plain taijutsu could ever be a Hiden technique. The very notion insults the idea of Hiden techniques. Taking what opportunity she can to talk about her kid, Tsunade reminds them that Sasuke's brother was Itachi again. At the young age of 14, Itachi already showed signs that would force reproach on any one of the three of them. Sasuke's no different, she claims, encouraging them to pay close attention to these next 2 fights. Sasuke's early life training was stunted because he lost his whole family while Itachi had his father to train him that whole time. Having given in slightly to overconfidence, Lee engages in further close-quarters strikes with Sasuke until the latter somehow lands a punch to Lee's ribs. Though the strike's impact didn't hurt much, precisely where Sasuke struck tore a hole in Lee's outfit, and his exposed skin there felt raw. Smirking at his successful strike, Sasuke takes a fast breath before launching a flurry of blows at Lee. Though Lee's dodging them all, the air begins to feel warm, and he's feeling soft pain across his body. Whatever Sasuke's doing is invisible to his eyes. Neji leans on the railing above the fight, his Byakugan activated to observe Sasuke's technique. He has no one to talk to up here, so he just grins in anticipation for his eventual fight with Sasuke with such a unique fighting style. None of these other contestants will hold a candle to that skill. Further along, Naruto is watching the fight carefully. He's overly aware that one of the two will be fighting him next. Without the flying Raijin, he can't so easily match either of them for speed, but he's already stubbornly refused to use it. With both Asuma-sensei and his dad watching, he can't buckle under that pressure. He only got a few days with Orochimaru for training leading up to today, but he also got years of training with Jiraiya and his dad. Grimacing, Naruto looks down at his hands and grips the railing hard. Is this the place where he is to showcase his training? A voice over his shoulder, ethereal and dark, whispers that no one likes him anyway, so why hold back? Swallowing, Naruto pushes the voice away. He thinks about where Kiba might be right now, before returning attention to the fight. While exchanging blows, Lee attempts a more technical approach to tie Sasuke up in a submission, but the Uchiha prodigy aptly defends against it. Suddenly, fire ignites on Lee's uniform and he pats it out, angrily asking how Sasuke is conjuring flames from nothing. What trick is this? Acting innocent, Sasuke wonders why Lee can't see the flames he's wreathed himself in. At point of contact, or near enough too, Sasuke changes the chakra he's channeling to his fists and kicks into fire. This enhances his offensive output and augments his effective range. Leaping away from Sasuke, Lee decides that he's meant to now exhibit his own ace. Crossing his fists and concentrating deep inside, Lee silently exerts all his focus on the first gate. First gate, gate of opening, release. Sasuke squints at Lee, smiling in his reaction. With this, his mental inhibitions relinquish, granting Lee a much faster reaction time to danger, as well as much more instinctive fighting styles. He could do the front lotus on a less skilled opponent, but he'd only be exhausting himself on someone as technically apt as Sasuke, who could potentially counter it. But even the slight alterations to his unconscious fighting could be enough to rout Sasuke's technique. If Lee had to do an additional match, he wanted to keep his other techniques hidden away if at all possible. Further exchanging blows though, Lee notices that quickly nothing has changed. Perhaps it's the Sharingan, but Sasuke seems just as quick at blocking his strikes as before. Frustrated that this is all the first gate can do against such a tough opponent, Rock Lee leaps away again. As Sasuke charges him, Lee releases the second gate, Gate of Healing. With this, his strength is enhanced and any fatigue he previously had melts away, opening the opportunity for him to swing as hard and fast as he can. Without the weight, he begins dodging to Sasuke's backside to force more active defenses, but he feels pain every time Sasuke dodges a blow, and he's unsure as to whether this was a side effect of the gate release. Might Guy warned that since he's still very new to the 8 gates, they could be harsher in consequence. As long as his bones don't break, he should be good. As much as it does hurt him to strike Sasuke, surely it's hurting Sasuke even more. Sasuke, meanwhile, is resisting groaning every time Lee hits him. It feels like he's being struck by a bat with every kick, and he's not sure how to properly counter this refreshed force. Switching up his strategy, Sasuke catches Lee's fist with his own hand and holds on as hard as he can. Lee attempts to disengage, but Sasuke is already generating earth around their hands to fuse the two together. While training with Tsunade, she explains to him that one of the consequences of enhancing one's chakra control, to such a degree at least, is that another chakra element may be learned at a much faster rate. Since he already has fire and lightning though, she is sure that he won't learn another chakra form for at least several years. Outside the Hyuga house, it's extraordinarily rare for ninja to develop more than 2 elements. But Sasuke's house was clearly gifted, so there was no telling his possibilities. It took a week. Just a week of specialized training for Sasuke to uncover the earth element. This was, of course, a side benefit of the training, yet still something he wanted to implement as much as he could. Fist firmly held and buried by a solid block of stone, Lee is now forced into a one-armed melee with Sasuke. Every attempt he makes at breaking the block is stopped by Sasuke. Catching Sasuke's other hand, Lee finds that he can still easily overpower his opponent, so he pulls as hard as he can. Lee hopes the strain will break Sasuke's arm or the stone. Either would be a benefit right now. Sensing Lee's intentions, Sasuke merely pushes to equalize the pressure and swaps elements again, surging lightning through his encased hand. Having zero ability to manipulate chakra, Lee has zero defense as the lightning surges into his body and electrocutes him. As the electrification ends, Lee urgently recovers and bashes his head into Sasuke's. Now dazed, Sasuke doesn't have the reaction time to stop Lee from breaking the boulder. Regaining his distance, Lee shakes off Sasuke's latest attack. Incorporating elements into his strikes was something Lee neither anticipated nor can he defend against. Sasuke's reducing Lee's staunch advantage with his chakra manipulation. Sasuke is realizing that though Lee's much better than him with taijutsu, the distance in their skills isn't enough for Lee to squash Sasuke. Utilizing Tsunade's teachings to coat his strikes in the element of his choice is so far proving to be a great success. But to end the fight, Sasuke's not sure it's even enough. Feeling the second gate begin to taper off, Lee decides that it's time to release his third gate, but as he attempts to do so, he misses the mark. He grows frustrated that he's failing to reach the third gate despite training for it with Might Guy so diligently. Perhaps the stress of an audience is scattering his concentration, intensifying his focus, his concentration, his need. Lee puts everything he has into releasing the gate, but it simply does not come. However, he's only got superficial burns across his body, and instead of letting his morale get crushed by his inability in this moment, Lee centers himself and prepares for another onslaught. What Sasuke doesn't know about failed releases won't bolster him in any way, so Lee pretends as if it didn't happen. Meeting in hand-to-hand again, both trade stances every few seconds as they gain cycling advantages over one another. Switching hard and fast between the fox, wolf, and tiger stances, Sasuke elects for a more direct approach to their melee. Lee, meanwhile, is attempting to employ all four styles, though Sasuke is actively countering the crane stance, the disabling style. Lee wonders how much longer Sasuke can go for, as they have to keep a keen attention to every single strike to recognize the style it's from and all of the potential future strikes that can come from it, as if chess were an action game, not a turn-based game. Up above, all three Kage agree that the two appear pretty evenly matched. A cites that the kid in the green bodysuit must be some sort of genius to somehow keep an Uchiha in line. Minato tells them that Rock Lee actually can't manipulate chakra at all. This sort of qualifies him as the exact opposite of a genius. His sheer determination and effort has brought him to this moment, not his brilliant mind. However, what Sasuke lacks in taijutsu compared to Lee, he makes up for in complex usage of his various chakra natures. Minato's impressed, clearly seeing the similarity to Tsunade's taijutsu style. Given a couple more years, Sasuke could definitely master this alteration of her technique. More than that, he's curious as to why Sasuke hasn't used very much ninjutsu so far, electing to stay locked in taijutsu combat with someone superior to him in that style. 2 weeks isn't enough time to close that gap. So what's he thinking? Tripped by a leg swipe, Sasuke breaks his fall, but in his recovery, Lee catches him by the collar. Twirling around Lee's arm, Sasuke quickly links his legs around Lee's head and holds on to Lee's arm. An armbar. The effects of the second gate have completely dissolved now, so Lee no longer has the strength to pick up Sasuke with the one arm. Flexible enough, Lee twists around and begins kicking Sasuke in the side in an attempt to loosen his grip. Pulling wire from his pack with one hand, Sasuke twists it around both Lee's locked arm and his own. This frees him up for hand seals as he performs his family's signature jutsu. He tells Lee to give up, but Lee declines to even entertain answering such a demand. Finishing his jutsu, Sasuke blasts Lee point blank with as much fire as he can muster. With his new chakra control heights attained, the flame grows much larger than he anticipated as it towers skyward. Though caught in the flame, Lee is still refusing to give up, even as his face is comically charred and his clothes have been burned black. He coughs smoke and is noticeably weaker than he was before the fireball, but still refuses to give up. Iruka tells Lee that if he doesn't give up, his arm will break, and he'll ruin his chances at a victory anyway. Snarling and groaning at his options and his inability to activate that third gate, Lee looks down at Sasuke, who's bracing as hard as he can to make Lee give up. Lee tells him in grunts that if they were opponents on a real battlefield, Sasuke would have to kill him to attain victory. Sasuke agrees, complimenting Lee on his voracious taijutsu and expressing a fear that he wouldn't want to face Lee in a real scenario. Torn between not wanting his arm broken and not wanting to lose, Lee struggles for an answer that he's not sure exists. Before he can find a solution, Sasuke surges another course of lightning into Lee again, and as his muscles seize, Sasuke gains a much stronger grip and pulls harder than ever, dislocating Lee's elbow. But he doesn't let go, resolving to hang on until Lee gives up or Iruka calls the match. Iruka asks Lee to break out of it if he can, as he will not tolerate dramatic pauses for the sake of it. Lee's trained so hard to succeed here. He's irritated that he's been forced into a lose-lose scenario. Growling through the pain, he tells Iruka that he has no answers, but still, he refuses to give up all the same. Shrugging, Iruka raises his hand and calls an end to the match, giving Sasuke the victory. Both competitors stand up, and Sasuke apologizes for Lee's elbow. Lee forgives him with a smile and decides that it's just not his time yet. Iruka directs Lee to the medic's exit to get his elbow addressed. Meanwhile, he tells Sasuke to stay where he is, as he has another match right now. Sighing, Sasuke did not realize just how exhausting his fight with Rock Lee would be. He asks if he can get a break, and Iruka nods at him, telling him that there will be a 15-minute break so he can gather himself. 15 minutes? Jiraiya looks dubiously at Tsunade. She never wins her bets. What dark winds are on the horizon now that she has? Scoffing at Jiraiya's sarcasm, Tsunade turns to Orochimaru and asks him how realistic Naruto's chances are of winning at this point. Orochimaru shrugs. The kid got a little bit of extra training, but he's spent most of his time, in the last 2 weeks at least, getting his seal repaired. However, from what Orochimaru's heard about it, there are other long-lasting side effects from their sealing procedure. Game over, man. That's the end of today's episode. To cover a few things, I need to remind everyone that Rock Lee is a year younger, so the feats he exhibits in the Chunin exams in canon will be much more impressive than here. He'll get there eventually, but nobody progresses to greatness instantly. I've also added some of my own flavor to the gates. Each one has a slightly different effect that, once combined together for the 8th gate, will essentially make you into Superman. So the focus is less on the fact that the 8th gate is super powerful. Instead, the focus is on how the 8th gate is a combination of all the other gates in addition to its own quirks. Also, I know Sasuke has access to all the chakra types in canon due to the Rinnegan, but if he's as genius as Itachi, then it only makes logical sense to me that he'd have more than 2 elements at his disposal leading up to that point. And perhaps in canon he developed a different element third than Earth, but I've already got many plans for him with this as his 3rd element, so look forward to that. On the other hand, I don't want to trivialize chakra elements. In canon, it's super rare for especially Genin to have so many elements at their disposal, but I'm going to have to pull the main character card on this one. Some characters have plot armor, others have plot weapons. It is a consequence of writing, but like I always say, I don't like characters unlocking something and then just being infinitely good at it instantly. Everyone has a learning curve, even the geniuses. Obviously, I've also changed Sasuke's backstory a little bit to give his mom more presence. We'll see more of this later. I also love the idea of the Sannin having their own seating area, and not even necessarily VIP seating. I was thinking more along the lines that they just want to sit separately, so they just use jutsu to create their own seats elsewhere. They might be 50 years old, but they're still rambunctious. Without further ado, I'll see you all next Monday. Naruto vs. Sasuke. Look forward to it. The sky's the limit.